Okay, so this is week 6 of 7, so we got one more to go in going over the agreement of sale. Does anybody have any questions so far from past weeks or anything that you wanted to clear up before we go on? Okay. Last time we left off, we're going to go over page 11 and 12 today, but we stopped short on page 10 because it rolls over into page 11. Paragraph 16, condominium plan community homeowners association notice. Okay. So A, property is not a condominium or part of a planned community unless checked below. So why is this section important? There's several reasons, because the lender needs to know so that they can do their due diligence, as well as the title company, in figuring out if there's any past liens, any debts, how the association is handled, if they have any bad liens or debts, stuff like that. Also, a lender needs to know if a home is a condominium, because typically condominiums will have a higher interest rate as well. They could be anywhere from 1/4 of a point to 1/2 a point even higher. And I never knew this until I sold a house in South Point Meadows, I believe it is. And if you drove through South Point Meadows, you would think, it's just a neighborhood of cookie cutter homes, single family detached homes. Well, the way that the developer got around to building 3,500 square foot houses on 0.15 acre lots was to label the neighborhood as a condo so that they can have a bigger building envelope and have the houses closer to one another. So when I mentioned to the lender that this house has a condo association, his eyebrow rose and said, oh, well, the rate's going to be a little higher on that. So just be aware of that. And especially if you're talking to a lender and a buyer is buying a home that's a condo, let them know up front. Okay. Especially with the fees and the fact that it is a condo. Okay. So under A, the first check mark is condominium, and it says condominium. The property is a unit of a condominium that is primarily run by a unit owners association. Section 3407 of the Uniform Condominium Act of Pennsylvania requires seller to furnish buyer with a certificate of resale and copies of the condo deck, other than plats and plans, the bylaws, and the rules and regulations of the association. Okay. Does everybody know why we get the resale cert, why that's so important? Okay. The resale cert will have information in it, if it's filled out properly, about where the current homeowner stands with the association, whether they're behind, they're ahead, what needs to be paid still, so that when your buyer takes over the property, they have a clean slate and not a debt. Okay. It also lets you be aware if there's any other things that were not disclosed by the homeowner, such as there's a special assessment coming up. Hey, we need to redo all the roofs and we need to redo the siding. So plan on a special assessment of $15,000 spread over the next 6 years. Okay, that type of deal. The next checkbox is planned community homeowner association. The property is part of a planned community as defined by the Uniform Planned Community Act, section 5407A of the act requires seller to furnish buyer with a copy of the declaration, other than plats and plans, the bylaws, the rules and regulations of the association, and a certificate containing the provisions set forth in section 5407A of the act. Okay. So same thing with a homeowners association. You got to get that resale cert, figure out what's still owed on the property, if there's any assessments coming up, and especially the rules and regulations. Are RVs allowed in this neighborhood? RV parking, boat parking, hanging clothes on the backyard, even having a home garden. Some of these associations don't allow that. So it's important for the buyer to know that, okay? Part B, the following applies to initial sales of properties that are part of a condominium or planned community. So I underlined initial sales because this is the first time it's being sold directly from the builder slash developer, okay, the first time. So under this paragraph, it states, if this is the first sale of the property after creation of the condominium or planned community, therefore a sale by the declarant, seller shall furnish buyer with a public offering statement no later than the date buyer executes this agreement. Buyer may void this agreement within 15 days of condominium or within 7 days if part of an HOA. After receipt of the public offering statement or any amendment to the statement that is materially and adversely affects buyer. Upon buyer declaring this agreement void, all deposit monies will be returned to the buyer as per paragraph 26. So I looked up what a public offering statement is, and it's in your notes there. Scroll down real quick to it. A public offering statement contains details about how the condominium is structured and managed, including its CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, restrictions. It also contains important disclosures about budgets, insurance, constructions, and rules. So just for an example, under construction, if you're buying in a HOA and it says that the masonry siding has to be a certain percentage, you know, the front has to be 30% stone and the rest can be vinyl, or colors that are allowed, color combinations. If it has to be stick built or can it be modular? So that type of stuff that can be in the public offering that is important to a buyer, especially if they're going to be building in that neighborhood. Part C, paragraph C. The following applies to resales of properties that are part of a condominium or HOA. So this is a resale, meaning from a homeowner to another potential homeowner, okay? Part 1, within 15 days from the execution date of this agreement, seller at seller's expense will request from the association a certificate of resale and any other documents necessary to enable seller to comply with the relevant act. The act provides that the association is required to provide these documents within 10 days of seller's request. So I think most HOAs are pretty good with that. If you give them enough time to produce the documents and not last minute. A lot of these property management companies have gone to the online way of doing it, which coincidentally makes it easier, but now it's much more expensive. I think I recently paid $350 for a resale certificate package from homedocs.com. So one trick of the rule on that is I believe HomeDocs says if you can wait the 10 days, it's this price. If you want it in the next 5 days, it's like $50 more. And if you want it in 2 days or next day, it's $150 more. Well, the one time we had inspections on this property for 15 days. So the inspection contingency was for 15 days. And right after the property was under contract, I ordered the resale cert. And I thought to myself, well, I don't really need to hurry it because the buyer still has this inspection contingency. If they back out, they're going to back out because of that. So I just put in, when I ordered the resale, that I wasn't in a hurry. I just needed it in the next 10 days from HomeWise Docs. Well, lo and behold, within 48 hours, I got it back. So sometimes you can save a little money if you don't wait till the last minute and order these things, okay? So that actually happened probably twice or 3 times to me, and I've heard other agents in the office say the same thing. So just be aware of that so you can avoid paying that rush fee. Okay. Paragraph 2. Seller will promptly deliver to buyer all documents received from the association. Under the Act, seller is not liable to buyer for the failure of the association to provide the certificate in a timely manner or for any incorrect information provided by the association in the certificate. So right there in the contract, that's an important point, that once you order it in a timely manner, you're not responsible as the seller for what the association does as far as getting it back to you in a timely manner. Also, the information that's in it is not up to the seller, it's on the HOA or condo association. The Act, number 3, the Act provides that buyer may declare this agreement void at any time before buyer receives the association documents and for 5 days after receipt or until settlement, whichever occurs first. Buyer's notice to seller must be in writing. Upon buyer declaring this agreement void, all deposit monies will be returned to buyer according to the terms of paragraph 26. So we've had people argue that, well, wait a minute, you can't back out because you haven't seen what the rules and regs are. How would you know how to back out? Well, that statement right there pretty much gives the buyer the right to back out at any time up until 5 days after they receive the documents. Okay. Number 4, if the association has the right to buy the property, first right of refusal, and the association exercises that right, seller will reimburse buyer for any costs incurred by buyer for any inspections or certifications obtained according to the terms of this agreement, and any costs incurred by buyer for 1, the title search, title insurance, mechanics lien insurance, or any fee for cancellation of those insurances. Number 2, flood insurance, fire insurance, hazard insurance, mine subsidence insurance, or any fee for cancellation of those insurances. Number 3, appraisal fees and charges paid in advance to mortgage lender. So the seller should know if the association has a right to buy the property back first before going through this whole sale process. So, but maybe they don't, and this provision right here states that the seller would be responsible to pay back the buyer for any of those fees incurred. Any questions on that section? Okay, it's pretty straightforward. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay.
Tom?
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that, or let everybody know that when you order a resale cert, it's good. It's only good for 30 days. And if the negotiation and everything goes longer than that, then you have to order another one and pay for another one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you ever run into that right of first refusal, and is that a very common thing?
No, but apparently it probably has happened in the state of PA, or else it wouldn't be in the contract. I don't think I've ever had that happen. Right across the street from me, somebody bought a building lot and has kept it a building lot, and clearly in the association documents it says that the buyer has to start construction within 90 days. Well, it's been almost 9 years and they haven't started construction. And really, if the HOA wanted to, it clearly states in our bylaws that they can go buy the property. So they just haven't enforced this homeowner or lot owner to start construction, which I don't think is right. But you know, that's another point. But yeah, I haven't seen it, Jim, but it probably has happened in the past, or else it wouldn't be in the contract. Okay.
Thank you.
Number 17, real estate taxes and assessed value. So this is more of just a notice than anything. And it states that in Pennsylvania, taxing authorities, school districts and municipalities, and property owners may appeal the assessed value of a property at the time of sale or any time thereafter. A successful appeal by a taxing authority may result in a higher assessed value for the property and an increase in property taxes. Also, periodic county-wide property assessments may change the assessed value of the property and result in a change in property tax. So I think Dauphin County and Cumberland County recently did one within the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It may be a while until they do it again, just because it's very expensive to do. It's probably just easier for them to charge more in the millage rate, get the taxes up that way. Okay. 18, maintenance and risk of loss. Under A, seller will maintain the property, including but not limited to structures, grounds, fixtures, appliances, and personal property, specifically listed in this agreement in its present condition, normal wear and tear accepted. Okay. Part B, if any part of the property included in the sale fails before settlement, seller will, 1, repair or replace that part of the property before settlement, or 2, provide prompt written notice to buyer of seller's decision to, and seller can either A, credit the buyer at settlement for the fair market value of the failed part of the property as acceptable to the mortgage lender, if any, or B, not repair or replace the failed part of the property and not credit buyer at settlement for the fair market value of the failed part of the property. So basically saying, yeah, it's Mr. Buyer, it's up to you. I'm not fixing anything else on this property. Everything else is on you after the settlement date. So if the seller opts for B2B, not repair or replace anything, part 3 here talks about that. Part 3 states, if seller does not repair or replace the failed part of the property or agree to credit buyer for its fair market value, or if seller fails to notify buyer of seller's, or if seller fails to notify the buyer of seller's choice, so meaning the seller doesn't even respond, buyer will notify seller in writing within 5 days or before settlement date, whichever is earlier, that the buyer will, okay, the buyer has 2 choices. A, accept the property and agree to the release in paragraph 28, or B, terminate this agreement by written notice to seller with all deposit monies returning to buyer according to terms of paragraph 26. So the most common thing I've ever seen this happen is hot water heaters. I think that's happened 2 or 3 times to us in the past 15 years, is the hot water heater always goes out. Now, those were simple fixes because the seller was still living there and they needed hot water. So they went out and got a replacement hot water heater right away. Now, one seller did ask me, he had I believe it was a 60-gallon tank. It was a real big tank. And he could get a deal on a 50-gallon tank. So he asked for my opinion, and I said, in my opinion, according to the contract, you're going to replace it with something similar or fair market value. And going from 60 to 50 is not fair market value or replacing what was there. So he did end up going with a 60-gallon tank, even though it costed him another $175. Okay. Now, if he were to keep pursuing that and say, no, Colin, I'm only putting in a 50-gallon tank, then my next act would have been in written notice to the buyer agent that, hey, the hot water heater went out. The seller is only willing to put in a 50-gallon tank. The 60-gallon tank is $175 more. are your buyers okay with the 50-gallon tank, or are they willing to pay $175 out of their own pocket for a brand new tank that they're going to own after settlement? Okay, so that would have been the next move if he kept pushing that issue. And then the buyer agent then could respond back with saying, yeah, it's fine, we'll pay the 175 difference, or no, the 50-gallon tank is okay. Or they could say, you know, my buyer's backing out over $175 tank. Okay, so that would be the situation and scenario that would play out in that case. Okay, the other big thing that I've noticed in this section is it's very similar to the municipality section we discussed last week, where the township went by and said, hey, your sidewalk needs to be replaced. It's pretty much the same language in here and the same process. So, okay. Any other questions on this section before we move on? Okay. Under 3, after lowercase b, there's a little term there. It says, if buyer fails to respond within the time stated in paragraph 18b3 or fails to terminate this agreement, so if the buyer doesn't do anything in response to the seller's response, then this agreement by written note, or this agreement by written notice to seller within that time frame, buyer will accept the property and agree to release in paragraph 28. Okay, so the buyer doesn't respond to the seller after the seller gave him 5 days, then the buyer is buying the property as is. Okay. C, seller bears the risk of loss from fire or other casualties until settlement. If any property included in this sale is destroyed and not replaced prior to settlement, buyer will A, accept the property in its then current condition, together with the proceeds from any insurance recovery obtained by seller, or B, they can terminate the agreement of sale. Okay. I made a note there. What if buyer does not respond? Section C, for some reason, doesn't have the statement that if the buyer doesn't respond in a timely manner, then they have to accept the property as is. So one good example of this that happened years ago in our office, we had an agent sell a very nice ranch house, modern ranch house in Carlisle. Okay, I believe it was right by Mayapple. And they were 2 days away from settlement. And for whatever reason, the seller decided to cancel their insurance 2 days before settlement. Well, that evening they had a hailstorm and it damaged the roof badly. And upon further review, they didn't have homeowners insurance. And now we have a house with golf ball sized holes in the roof, and the seller is responsible for that. So they had to make some kind of concession to get the roof fixed, or else the buyer was not going to buy the house. So it's very important for you, when, especially if you represent the seller, to tell them not to cancel the insurance until you leave that settlement with check in hand and the money's in their account. The proceeds are in their account. Okay. It's very risky. You never know what'll happen. The other thing, since we're on the topic of this whole insurance thing too, is if you have a seller with a vacant home, they really should check with their insurance company to see how that's being covered. Okay. We've found out in the past that vacant homes are sometimes not covered in a homeowner's policy. Okay. Every homeowner policy is different, so they may want to call and talk directly to their agent and find out what is covered, what isn't. Okay. Especially if you do a post-settlement lease too, or a pre-settlement lease. Okay. Paragraph 19, home warranties. At or before settlement, either party may purchase a home warranty for the property from a third-party vendor. Buyer and seller understands that a home warranty for the property does not alter any disclosure requirements of seller, will not cover or warrant any pre-existing defects of the property and will not alter, waive, or extend any provisions of this agreement regarding inspections or certifications that buyer has elected or waived as part of this agreement. Buyer and seller understand that a broker who recommends a home warranty may have a business relationship with the home warranty company that provides a financial benefit to the broker. Okay. For example, AHS. I'm not sure if they still do or not, but if you use them, they give the agent that orders it back then $75. Okay, as a referral fee. So right there, it's section 19, paragraph 19. It gives that little statement that the agent may benefit financially from this home warranty. Okay. Move on to the next section. Recordings.
Hey, Con,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just going back to the home warranty for a minute.
Yes.
What if the agent buys the warranty? Is that really a liability to the agent?
No, it's I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so, in my opinion, unless you're concealing something.
When I've done that, I was told to, if you're gonna buy the home warranty, instead of pay it directly out of your like personal account, to have the commission reduced by the amount of the home warranty, and it's actually then gonna be purchased by the seller.
Yep.
But you would be receiving the less. So it would be the wash. I don't know if that meant because it was a liability or not. It was just suggested that it would come from the seller.
Right. That's actually a good idea, Stacy, probably because too, I don't know how much of it you can write off, right? Because technically it would be a gift for taxes. So, yep. But Sue, was there a reason why you asked that, or?
No, I was just thinking, if it ends up being used and the seller says, well, the reason you got it for me is I thought it was gonna cover this or that,
Okay.
or,
Yeah. And that goes into explaining the whole warranty thing, that it's not a band-aid for issues. It's just there for backup assurance just in case. And obviously with warranty companies, not everything's going to be covered. They'll try to find ways to not cover it, which is why some of these companies, I think when we had Cheryl on, that they do cover pre-existing now. Cost more, but they'll cover some pre-existing items. Okay.
Okay.
20. Talks about recordings. This agreement will not be recorded in the office of the Recorder of Deeds or in any other office or place of public record. If buyer causes or permits this agreement to be recorded, seller may elect to treat such act as a default of this agreement. Okay. So why doesn't a seller want a buyer to record this agreement of sale, this 14-page document? Okay. Before settlement. Well, what if the deal falls through? Okay. I know we're in a very good market right now where everything's going over asking price, but when the market's not so great and you list a house for $350,000 and after 170 days, the best offer you get is $275 and the buyer goes and records it. Now everybody knows what this seller was willing to take. And if the deal falls through, then it's out there in public record, right? So go back to the statement there where it says Office of the Recorder of Deeds or in any other office or place of public record. So is a buyer agent making a postcard before settlement saying, I got my buyer a great deal on this house. It was $350 and I got him $275. Does that violate this paragraph? Anybody?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know the correct answer, but it just sounds like it. Especially in that, or in any other office or place of public record. Okay. All right, number 21, assignment. This agreement is binding upon the parties, their heirs, personal representatives, guardians, and successors, and to the extent assignable on the signs of the party hereto. Great attorney language. Buyer will not transfer or assign this agreement without the written consent of seller unless otherwise stated in this agreement. Assignment of this agreement may result in additional transfer taxes. So let me just scroll down here, my note section. I just wrote up a little scenario. And again, I don't know 100% the answer to this. I've never really have done a deal where the buyer assigned the contract to somebody else. But just for an example, if my name was on the contract as the buyer, okay, and then midway through the deal, I assigned United Mosaic, a company, as the buyer, okay? And what if I bought the property for $200,000 from the seller on that contract, okay? And then I assigned United Mosaic, but they're gonna pay me $230,000. Should I have to pay $2,000 for the 1% transfer on the 200K plus another 2,300 on the assign? Or should I pay zero because I'm just putting this buyer with this seller? I found a buyer before I even bought the property. Brooks, didn't you recently go to something like this on wholesaling?
Yeah, my uncle and I attended a wholesale class, and I believe you wouldn't be a part of paying any type of transfer tax. The end buyer would pay the transfer tax. The margin that you make would fall under income tax, on your end.
Okay. So we probably see this more with wholesalers in this situation, is if you represent a wholesaler on a property. Okay. And there are some
I
savvy
have a
investors that do that too. So go ahead, Morgan.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have a particular buyer, and he really liked this property, really wanted it, and his offer lost. Well, as he kept looking around, he was like, I should have like went higher on that. I should have been more competitive. So then he was wanting me to contact the listing agent to buy the current buyer out of their contract and give them like cash to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about here? Because I thought we couldn't do that.
No. That would be, well, it could, if the buyer assigned your buyer to the deal, but probably in that case, that seller and the original buyer would have to agree to terminate, okay, in order for your people to step in with a new contract. Assigning means midway. Go ahead, Brooks.
Yeah, they could keep it under contract. So anytime a buyer has a written contract with the seller, they have what's called equitable interest in the property. That interest there can be assigned And basically that part of the contract says that it can't be signed unless all parties agree in writing. So if there's an addendum to the contract that states, you know, to the effect that new buyer is buying first buyer's equitable interest in the property, you could kind of carry on with the same contract. It is definitely lawful and legal to do that.
Yeah. I guess it would just have to have enough money involved from the last party, Morgan's party, to cover if there was ever a dispute over the deposit money or anything. I mean, it can get a little tricky, right?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how EMDs get worked out in that scenario. That's a different case, but yeah, you
Yeah.
can definitely assign your equitable interest, and it is done, not that common like Morgan's talking about, where,
Right.
you know, a buyer goes to the person who has it under contract and makes them an offer to buy it over and above what they paid for.
Right. It has happened in our office though, actually. It's pretty unique, but it's a way of getting a house in this market, you know, after the fact. Do you have any other questions, Morgan, or we kind of answer it?
Yeah, I didn't think that that was permitted, so I just wanted to make sure. I mean, that house is now already closed, but
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Number 22, governing law, venue, and personal jurisdiction. A, the validity and construction of this agreement and the rights and duties of the parties will be governed in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of PA. Okay. So a court in New Jersey has nothing to do with this contract, even if the buyer is from New Jersey. Okay. It's whatever is the governing state. B, the parties agree that any dispute, controversy, or claim arising under or in connection with this agreement or its performance by either party submitted to a court shall be filed exclusively by and in the state or federal courts sitting in the Commonwealth of PA. So this paragraph 22 states that no matter where the buyer came from, who's writing the contract, if there is a dispute and it has to go to court, the court has to be in the state of PA. And the laws of PA supersede wherever the buyer came from. Okay. So that provision helps keep lawsuits here in the state of PA by using the PA par form. Number 23, Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act of 1980, FIRPTA, as it's commonly called. The disposition of a U.S. real property interest by a foreign person, the transferor, the seller, is subject to the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act of 1980, income tax withholding. FIRPTA authorized the United States to tax foreign persons on dispositions of U.S. real property interests. This includes, but is not limited to, a sale or exchange, liquidation, redemption, gift, transfers, etc. Persons purchasing U.S. real property interests, the transferee, the buyer, from a foreign person's, certain purchasers, agents, and settlement officers are required to withhold up to 15% of the amount realized. Special rules for foreign corporations. Withholding is intended to ensure U.S. taxation of gains realized on disposition of such interests. The transferee / buyer is the withholding agent. if you are the transferee / buyer, you must find out if the transfer is a foreign person as defined by the act. If the transfer is a foreign person and you fail to withhold, you may be held liable for the tax. So if you buy a property from a foreign person and you go through a reputable title company, most likely they'll find this out for you. Okay. And at that point, they'll contact the list agent and the seller that there will need to be a withholding for this, for the sale of this property. If what it states in here is if, and they're holding 15%, if the buyer or anybody representing the buyer fails to withhold any money, then they turn around are liable for that tax in the future, very near future. So 15%, that's a lot of money. On a $300,000 house, you're looking at, what's that, 45 grand? It has to be withheld. Okay, so it's very important that you use a good title company that'll find this out for you. And especially if you're on the listing agent side too, you might as well ask, you know, that if they are a citizen or not. If they have foreign interest in a property that you're selling, they're going to have to be withholding, you'll have to withhold some money at the sale so that they can pay this tax. Okay, I know it's a touchy subject to ask, but it is what it is, because
So this is held at the closing table off the HUD, similar to like the estate tax or
yes,
something.
inheritance tax or
Yes. And it's only held like if the buyer is a not a US citizen.
seller.
So this is only for the seller.
Yes, but the buyer is responsible to make sure that that tax is withheld.
So nothing actually happens though if your buyer is not a US citizen, but he's
Not until
coming
they sell. Not until
Not
they go to
until they sell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So the seller, if they're not, if they are a foreign person, then they're going to get taxed, and it's up to the buyer to make sure that that tax is withheld at the settlement. Okay. Um, 24, notice regarding convicted sex offenders, Megan's Law. The Pennsylvania General Assembly has passed legislation, often referred to Megan's Law, providing for community notification of the presence of certain convicted sex offenders. Buyers are encouraged to contact the municipal police department or the PA State Police for information relating to the presence of sex offenders near a particular property, or to check the information on the PA State Police web. And there's the website right there. It's also important if you're working with a buyer, and this is important to them, to have them download the app. There are apps that you can find local sex offenders within the neighborhood that you're looking in, and it'll tell you who's all in there. And be surprised, because there's a lot. You know, there's a lot of them out there. But if this is important to them, tell them to download the app and take a look, and enter an address in, and it'll tell you who's a sex offender within X amount of feet from that neighborhood. Okay.
Hey, Kwong.
Yeah.
I have a question. It kind of pertains to this. It's a little bit different, but I've had people ask me, if they're looking to buy, they want to know the crime rate in certain areas, obviously trying to avoid bad areas if possible. And being familiar with this area, I know, kind of know which areas are good, which areas are bad, but is there a website or resource for that kind of thing?
Yeah. again, if it's important to them, they can certainly contact the municipal police department or the state police. Same thing.
Just call them directly.
Yeah. I wouldn't go about saying this neighborhood is bad, that area is bad, because then you're,
I know you have to be careful about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
all right. Last section we'll cover today, because 26, I wanted to do 26 and 28 together because I think they're referenced probably like 15 times in this contract. So we'll keep both of them together for our last section, especially since page 14 really is just a blank page other than signatures, but it's probably the most important page. But number 25 talks about representations, okay? A, all representations, claims, advertising, promotional activities, brochures, or plans of any kind made by seller, broker, their licensees, employees, officers, or partners are not a part of this agreement unless expressly incorporated or stated in this agreement. This agreement contains the whole agreement between seller and buyer, and there are no other terms, obligations, covenants, representations, statements or conditions, oral or otherwise, of any kind whatsoever concerning this sale. This agreement will not be altered, amended, changed, or modified except in writing, executed by the parties. So there's a lot going on in there. Let's say in the MLS, you say that the fridge is staying. And then the walkthrough comes and there is no fridge. Who's right, who's wrong? Anybody?
Well, it has to be on the contract. That's what counts, not the ad so much, right?
Right, at least per this statement, right? So again, going back to page 3, the list of items to remain, that's really important, especially if it's not your standard item or the items that are already pre-written into the contract, that extensive list that we went through. Definitely the washer, dryer, fridge, that's missing from there. I have to check again, but I think the pellet stove wasn't in there, but if it's a primary source of heat, yes, it should stay. But if you're questioning whether it should or shouldn't, just write it in, okay? Be detailed about it. Part
Hey.
B.
Con,
Yeah,
along with that A, I know a lot of buyers, when they're submitting their contract, will have their buyer sign the MLS sheet and send it along.
right.
That really does not make it part of the contract, does it?
Are not part of this agreement unless expressly incorporated or stated in this agreement. So they would have to almost write in,
On the last page.
yes. Just because you initialed it doesn't mean that it's part of the contract. You have to put it in. A lot of agents write in all items per MLS, okay? Which is still not really that detailed, but now they are making the items listed in MLS as part of the contract. Okay, which I really hate that phrase. If it came down to, a lot of agents write in all items per MLS, and under the included item, it says refrigerator and washer and dryer. Just write it out. It probably took you just as long to write all items per MLS and disclosure as the items that are included in the MLS.
Hey,
Yeah.
Kong.
Yeah,
Some will have those items to convey lists that they have you sign. Are you able to put on that line see attached items to convey list?
You can do that, or on the very last page, there's a checkbox and then there's a blank line that says other forms. Now
Okay,
it has like, the pre-settlement possession, post-settlement possession. You can check mark one of those boxes and just put in utility sheet or items to remain sheet by Coldwell Banker, provided
Okay.
by Coldwell Banker, yeah. And then now you made that part of the contract.
okay.
Good questions. Yeah, I would say Tim, once a year, probably has to argue whether a pellet stove stays, a fridge stays, or something, just because it wasn't listed, it was just assumed. Okay. Part B, unless otherwise stated in this agreement, buyer has inspected the property, including fixtures and any personal property specifically listed herein, before signing this agreement, or has waived the right to do so and agrees to purchase the property in its present condition. Okay. So when they say buyer has inspected the property, to me, it's not just when they say inspect the property. I think for me, my interpretation of it is walk through the property, right? Can't inspect the property if you haven't walked through it. So if they've waived the right to walk through it, then they agree to purchase it in its present condition. Subject to inspections, contingencies elected in this agreement. Buyer acknowledges that brokers, their licensees, employees, officers, or partners have not made an independent examination or determination of the structural soundness of the property, the age or condition of the components, environmental conditions, the permitted uses, nor of conditions existing in the locale where the property is situated, nor have they made a mechanical inspection of any of the systems contained therein. Okay. C, any repairs required by this agreement would be completed in a workmanlike manner. What's a workmanlike manner? Anybody? Brooks?
It's very subjective.
Right.
Yeah,
It is
I-
very subjective, right?
not very specific, obviously.
It kind of leaves it up to buyer and seller. It really just say buyer and seller should agree on the work, the completion of the project, how it should be completed. What is Uncle Bob, who does the side job of being an electrician, good enough? Right? It's very subjective. So, but please work out those details before you have the work done. Okay. D, brokers have provided or may provide service to assist unrepresented parties in complying with this agreement. So it says parties, so it could be buyer or seller. Okay. So just because a person's unrepresented and they don't understand the contract doesn't mean you can take advantage of them. Okay. You have to be fair to everybody. And actually that statement goes back to the consumer notice as well. So we're going to stop there. Anybody have any questions in regards to what we discussed today in page 11 and 12? We're going to stop here because I have to go through the entire contract and find out every single place where they note paragraph 26 and 28 so we can go over it and have a better understanding of this deposit money if there is a dispute and how to handle it next week. And that'll be the last week of the 14 pages. So last chance. Any other questions?
Kong, just one real quick thing to add. When we were talking about, appliances to stay in the agreement of sale. When you're writing those things in, one thing I like to do is write the word existing, refrigerator or washer and dryer as well. Just a little bit more specific. And, we talked earlier about replacement of items just have to be of equal quality. If you want that specific appliance that's in the house, make sure you say existing. That way it's defined and very specific.
Yeah, remember that property you sold down in York and New Brittany, and the guy was like, I have to take this dishwasher with us.
Right. Yeah.
So,
He was adamant about
Yeah.
taking that one.
Yep. So, all right, folks, thank you for attending today, and we will wrap this up next week.